Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. Recently, I've been getting a lot of clients talking to me about some of the issues they're encountering in those homes. So, finding out that a lot of the kids are testing limits are getting very disrespectful, and I'm seeing a lot of them want to know what could you really do about disrespectful children. Well, unfortunately, there's no single answer for that. However, there are things that we can do that can help us manage, even though we're going through these trying times. The kids are going to be testing as well, right? They're going to be going through the same amount of stressors, and it could come out in different ways. But for whatever reason, you know, if your child's not feeling confident and secure, those behaviors are going to show themselves, and they're going to be going at it and testing all kinds of boundaries. And it's just going to end up being disrespectful behavior. And how you take it will really um, be the deciding factor if you're handling it well or not. How you manage that behavior, how you deal with it, how you see it, how you try to cope with, that will impact your home. And I think a lot of people are talking about it now because it's really starting to be a real issue in families. And I mean, it makes sense if you really think about it, right? But what are some of these behaviors? I'm hearing about swearing. Just young kids today, just cursing at them. It's almost like it's a norm now. It's on the internet, it's in the homes. It's like a new language. And I mean, you have to reflect back to times. So even when I was growing up, there was none of that. Are you serious? You know, there was none of that cursing at families and swearing at it. And, that swearing is very disrespectful. And I know there's certain instances where we have to try to see beyond it, but it still feels very disrespectful. All that cursing, especially when they're cursing at you. Whoa. And then when they're being a little bit sassy, right? Or some people say extra, or just, a little irritated, being a little bit, carrying on a little bit too much, showing some rudeness and some defiance. How do we deal with that? How do we get behind these behaviors? Because they're coming out, and it's going to come out more, and it's even going to peak to a point where this is information that's going to need to be um, absorbed by a lot of people because it's coming, people. I know a lot of people don't believe it, but it's coming. And that means all these kids, they got to decompress. They've been inside, and it seems like, imagine, it's almost like being locked up, but you're really locked up for like about, what, at least 5 months now almost. And the kids have been locked up, and by the time September comes, oh. So if it's bad now, you could imagine, you know. And some people say I've been hearing, the children are rude, and they're being spoiled, and they're very disrespectful. You know what I mean? And that's why it's just gotten out of hand in a lot of situations. And we can't just attribute it to COVID 19. However, there definitely is an impact. However, I'm finding that that's been the case even before COVID 19. People have been discussing this rude behavior that they're seeing exhibited in the children. And where is this coming from? I don't know. I think it's this generation that has access to everything, and it's like it's all gloves off. There used to be limits when we were growing up. There used to be movies that were even really rated for certain age groups. There were more things that were checkpoints for us to keep these things in check, right? You weren't allowed to carry on like that and curse at your parents. And I'm telling you, my household, you could not do that. I mean, there were some real consequences back then. We can't do none of that nowadays. And I think that's also a thing, right? The kids know it. The kids know that you're limited on what you can really do because they know there'll be consequences in it for you. See, they knew what it was like 20 years ago, but now today, these kids got their rights and they know their rights. And some of them are asserting their rights. They're using that power. Whereas before they knew they had the power and they kept it under their finger, but Now, boy, they're pushing the button. They're quick. If they got to call the police, they'll call them quick on you. You know what I mean? If you ain't getting along or seeing their way, there's a lot of things. I mean, and it's funny because I do blame a lot of the social media groups as well. It's that too much access to everything for some of these young people, and it could take over and just steer them in such direction. I mean, everybody wants to be a superstar. Everybody wants the attention, and that's why they call it the me generation. Me, 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 me. And see, when they get so focused on that, living up that dream, they can't come back to reality. A lot of them to talk to you and me, who's got to take care of business. A lot of them are, you know what I mean. They got their minds made up. You can't tell them nothing. See, because we're talking about what happens. The way they're acting, and it's a challenge. And you got to be mindful of these things. That it could push you. It could trigger you. And you could be triggered to argue back, but you have to still keep these things in mind. But when you're going through it, you don't even think of these things. But it's true. I think a lot of the kids today, even in the last 10, 15 years, they're challenging. And they're more vocal in a lot of sense of the word, and trying to be more independent, but it's still coming off a little bit as disrespect. I have friends telling me they're having the same problems. Kids that are challenging their every word, you know? That's what it is. And it happens to be like that. I mean, overheard my friend saying, "Oh my goodness, like my child's so rude. It's such a challenge. They're so spoiled and disrespectful." And it's their children. But their children are driving. Some of them just say, like, I'd never have spoken to my parents like that. They would have tore me up if I even thought about talking to them like that, you know? And they do say it. They're like, I bet you nobody else kids act like that. And it's sometimes they just shake their head. And you know it. And sometimes you see it in public too. When those kids are acting up. See, that's some of the worst when it's in public. In the home, that's one thing, but in public, oh my goodness. When you have the children acting up in public, trying to make a scene and flipping out, you're like, oh, that's a pressure in itself. And that's the last thing you want, right? To have them acting up. They should know better, but the ones that are acting up, and see, when they're acting up in public, the best thing that you could do at that point is de-escalate the situation by stepping back, and you know what I mean, from it, not pushing the issue, because they're going to go on and on and on, because once they got the floor and the show, they're ready to go. And you can't be doing that. You can't buy into that. So that's why I said that's a whole different environment, but that's some of the worst. I hate it because it's an attention seeker, and boom, everybody's on it. And it's not just that you feel embarrassed more than anything that your child or something is acting like that in a public place, and you know they're irrespective of what people are doing around them, they're just carrying on. And I'm telling you, I see that. I do see it, honestly. I do see it in certain environments for sure. I saw it growing up, and like I said, it's not unfamiliar to me when these people tell me about their kids that are acting up right now and being disrespectful and challenge them often. You see, some people think that when kids do become disrespectful, it should be taken as some sort of lightly or as a compliment, simply because that's an opportunity for the kids to express themselves. See, that's the way that people say, right? That this disrespect should be looked up as some sort of compliment because it's a safe area, safe zone for the child to express herself. And see, there's a part of that I agree with for sure. But there's this other part of me that, I'm not so sure. It's simply because, it's not one way, simply because I believe that it could get really harsh in a situation where you're getting a disrespect from a child and they're just bringing it out and going on. And like if a child continues on with the disrespect, with the verbal, sure, you can take it up to a certain point, but that you're not going to be thinking of that compliment area when you're dealing with that. You're going to have your backup sometimes, And you're going to be going on and squirting on about nonsense for a lengthy period of time. So you got to be watch out for being trapped even with that thought. Oh, I think sure it is a safe place and it's good that they do have a safe place. But like I said earlier, some of them do it in public. They're not even worried about it. Some are. They're snapping. A lot of them are snapping in the home, but when it gets in public, that's a different thing. You know, your child could be one way in one environment and totally different for you. And sometimes that's just how it is. Where they know how to act right in certain environments in public. But then when they're with you, sometimes they let their guard down and then they just boom. I always think there needs to be some healthy relationship. However, you know, it could be a point where you're so challenged. It's like you could be dealing with a kid that's grabbing things, throwing things around, and not listening and going through their challenges, and you're trying to understand them, and it's hard to get through with them. And you're trying your best to not lose yourself, but it feels like you're going uphill. It's like an uphill battle. But people say that's a way for those kids to express it. So you can't take it that deep, but I'm saying it can, wear on you through time. It definitely can wear on you. And you need to think about, yes, their safety, but you also need to think about your safety and your being trapped into a situation where you're arguing, carrying on back in, and or getting rhymed on a lot, where they're just belting it out at you and disrespecting all the time. You see, there's things you have to watch for. And know yourself and know what you can take. And know that it's quite possible you're not using the word no. And see, that's where you find yourself. We're talking about reasons why some of them go to that point because they're not accepting the word no. Oh, they understand it. They're not used to it. But that no, oh man, that could get them tearing down walls, throwing things, going to the extreme if they get the no. And snapping, and some of them are snapping for certain periods of time where they got that angry look on their face for like a day and a half, right? Because you said no. But they're not used to no. They're used to yes, getting their way, and they're not thinking about how you're coping or how you're dealing. They just can't handle the word no. Or they could have gone through something. A number of things could have happened before they got disrespectful. We don't know, but what we do know is they're acting it out on us. And we need to keep something in mind that as disrespectful as they are trying to share some information with us. They want to let us know that they're not doing so well. They're not feeling their best. So when they're knocking things around, look at that as just view it as expression, a form of communication. They got to get it out. I like to look at it as venting, right? Because they're people still are young, and these are children, and they're trying to communicate. And these are ways they might not have the language for what they really want to say, or they're so frustrated that it's not going to come out in words, so it comes out in actions. And sometimes, as scary as it could be, we have to let it come out. We have to be willing to be patient and understand this may be part of the process. Does it feel good? No. You just got to do something when you realize that this person may be going through some things. You got to try your best to figure out what is causing this behavior. You know, because these kids are coming out with some confusion. They're very confused in their emotions and their feelings, and they're getting pent up. And it's just like carrying weight on their shoulder, right? It's like carrying weights, 20-pound weights on each shoulder. It feels heavy for them. So you gotta try to help them figure it out. And sometimes you might let them act out. Don't try to intervene, shut it down, because a lot of us try to get behind it and get our point across. Because number one, we're either afraid of something's gonna go wrong, or we got to defend our point. But are we really taking time to listen to each other? No, this is time where you got to figure out what's causing some of this behavior. Why is this person? Because that is clearly something going on. And you try not to feed into it. I'm not saying get abused and, when they're disrespecting, tripping, but I think we have to take a different approach. We can't take the old traditional because a lot of us jump to the old traditional too quick. And it should be hands off, but we get baited. I'm going to say I'm guilty myself. I get baited, you know. And I'm serious. When you get baited, and the reason why you get baited is because let's say your child's being disrespectful and you might have a point, but they're just going off. So let's say you know that they're going through something, but they're trying to vent and express themselves and you're doing your best. However, you're on that side. They're on their side and you're on your side. And you're listening, you're trying to be accommodating and observant and supportive. However, then it always you got to be careful because that person who's being disrespectful is going to be using things in those words that might trigger you. See? And once you get triggered, see, it's hard to back down because they're saying words that, oh my goodness, they end up bringing things to you and bringing up old material, things that happened a couple of days ago, or even divulging things that you discuss with them in private. You know what I mean? It just, the disrespect could get right into that argument and you could get baited in. And so you have to know, first of all, that you're dealing with someone in most cases when they're getting disrespectful, they're in the comfort zone. Okay, they're around people that they know, family, so they're feeling safe for sure. So then it's all bets are off. Like they're going all out. They got a lot on their chest. And you're going to have to let them get it off their chest. And this is a time now that I'm saying all the strategies out there, we're going to go through some, and techniques, but one of the most important is for us to let our guards down a little bit and go, all right, I didn't say just ignore it all. I'm saying understand it first and understand that there's going to be a lot of feelings mounting up and they don't know how to express them, how to put them into words. So we must be prepared. And there's a couple things that we can do. We got to ignore some of it. And I do mean that. Like, I don't mean ignore the kid entirely, but don't take it, look at it like, don't take it at face value. When they're saying things, look, okay, behind that, think of it like a mask. What's behind the mask? Because when you take it at face value, like, oh my goodness, it's so deep. But then when you take it and go, okay, I'm understanding what's going on. I have to, and this is a behavior that you will have to get into to manage it. You're not just gonna pick it up because you're gonna be triggered a couple times when they say things. Because the disrespect could be verbal, could be physical, and if it gets physical, that's a whole different thing. And we're going to talk about that. That physical part is something else. But I mean, when they're just trying to express themselves and it's not physical violence towards you, it might be physical violence on let's say you got an office in the house and they're throwing things around. It's not even their room. And they're in there throwing. Some of you are going to jump. Some are going to leap. Some are going to get charged because they're going to be like, that's my personal stuff. But the point is that they will test boundaries and they will show through their communication their displeasure with you, and they will go after some certain things that they know you value. If it's not your ego, they're gonna attack. They're gonna attack something physical. But see, this is something that is gonna take a lot of patience. It's gonna take a lot of understanding. And I'm sure if your child could, they would say, help me. I'm really not in control right now. I'm feeling uneasy. Things ain't going right. But they're not going to just sit up and say that to you. No way. So they're going to. This is a part of the growing phase, believe it or not. I mean, before it was different, but now there are some things that you can't ignore. And you're going to have to deal with it. Some of you try to because you're basically going into your safe zone. And it works for you a lot of the time, but it doesn't work for the person who's being disrespectful. They either build up or they keep on going. So ignoring isn't going to do anything. You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have those type of tones and, sucking of the teeth and not responding at certain times. But, let them go through that. You don't. You're on that different tip where you understand you're the person you're aware of what's going on, you're in control, and you also got to let them be who they got to be to get it off their chest. And if they got to talk about it, they got to talk about it. But rarely is it just an easy situation. But you can't ignore it and walk away from it and think it's going to get better. Yes, you feel better for, because I do. I have some friends that say that. They're like, you know what? A lot of times when they get like that, I just walk away. But it might, you know what the funny thing is, when I think about it now, it might be some coping strategy for them. I can't even tell you. But I mean, you can't continuously ignore it. It's got to be dealt with. And some people, they really fret. They're in fear when it comes to having to deal with, a child that's disrespectful, like where it could take them. So they try to avoid it at all costs. We have to address it, but in a sensitive way. See, some people just go after that disrespectful behavior and they really punish the kids, and it pushes them deeper and deeper into this behavior, problematic behavior per se. And then in which, they don't respond well. They just keep up this behavior because it's just a consequence, the consequence, the act. And the thing, it becomes repetitive and it's really stressful for both parties. So we have to think of, now that we understand it's a form of communication and there's clearly something going wrong with the children. We have to not only find the causes and figure out how we're going to communicate through it. And one way we do it is by how we say what we want to say when we're talking to them, as opposed to pointing the you. You, instead of pointing at them and saying you do this and you do that, use I statements. I, right? Like, oh, I'm not happy when I hear this, that. So, or instead of you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. Like that gets their back up, and it's just gonna keep them on and on. And it's a saga that once you're engaged in it, it could be a real challenge. So just the language itself and how you say things, be honest and clear, and do not go into blaming. Speak nice to them in a calm manner. Be listening. Let them come down a little bit where they can meet you, and don't be accusatory, because it's going to backfire. And they're going to get their back up, and then it's going to escalate again, because I think some of it goes in cycles, some of this disrespect. And as much as you feed it, if you feed it, it's not a problem, it's how you feed it. So if you feed it by being accusatory, then it's just going to keep on going, and it's going to stay in their mind and revisit, right? But if you're being more supportive and you're using the I statements, then they start to see that you're listening to them. So the how you say and what you say is important, right? That's very important, because your reaction, it means a lot to them. And when they are at their height of disrespect, that's going to be the hardest thing to try to turn that around. Like, how are you going to be able to reconnect with them, right? Well, you're at some point you're going to have to. You're never going to feel like it. Some people go, well, I get into this disrespect, I don't want to deal with them, period. So yeah, you might have to take some time. For sure. And give you, like, just take a break if it's getting so disrespectful. Just step back for a little bit. I just think the more you know what I mean, go at them, the more it's like stoking a fire. So you got to step back for a little bit. But at some point, you're going to have to make a play. You're going to have to learn to be more inviting. It may not be what you want to do. Matter of fact, it's probably the last thing you want to do, but you're going to have to do it. And you might have to use humor or something to break it up, or offer something, of anything, something that they like. They might not be in the mood for it. They might be ready for it. You don't know, but you might have to joke it down. You know what I mean? You might have to just put on your smiley face, like, "Hey, you, Come here for a minute, right? Or you just play around with them a little bit. Just break it up because it gets intense. It's some of the hardest thing to do, but this is strategy you're going to have to probably implement at some point if you want to get on the other side of that hump and reconnect back. Because at some point you do. The question is how. Some people take longer than others. Some people need it a lot longer. However, at some point, you're going to need to make that because more often than not, they know they went far. They know they went off, and they might be feeling the guilties, but that's just it. How far is too far? Now that's the real question. Because when I talk about disrespect, okay, how much is too much? And see, the talking in that too, that's something where number one, I'm not talking about a physical reaction. I'm talking about a reaction, a response. Because it can be a lot. And I mean a lot. When you're getting rained down on by somebody. And I say to a lot of parents and clients, I say, listen, you can handle what you got to handle. But if it gets to that point where you're it's getting too much for you, you're going to need some support. You're going to need to be communicating with family members and maybe get some professional support and with that person. And you might have to initiate with them so that they can say what's on their mind. That might be a step that you got to do. But you can't just take it. You can't sit there and take it. And it can be overbearing to the point where you feel useless and hopeless. That's not even the point. You got to maintain some respect in your home. There has to be a level of respect, but there will be challenges. You don't take it to the very end where you're ultimatum, but they have to choose. They're little kids, but you got to there's certain things you have to try to do when they're little, and if they because a lot of people's kids, I've seen a lot of kids on all different levels in every capacity, like challenging. Trust me, and I'm telling you, there's such a spectrum in behaviors and like there's so many things to consider. It's not like everybody's on one level, but what I can see is some commonality out there. Kids that are pushing it to young, they need to be shown certain things. And instead of the punishing and the discipline, we have to come at it from a strategy point of view where we're showing them and modeling for them how to be cool and come back and how to maintain respect. But we still have to have our limits. And that's why I say if you don't, you got to get support if you need to. Because if it's getting to that too disrespectful point, you got to get definitely some support. And you, like I said, should be communicating if you're having a real problem with too much disrespect. But any disrespect going out there needs to be managed well. And you need to understand where they're coming from. And I don't mean absorb it to the point where it's breaking you down. No. Because I believe this, especially when they're young, there's a part of me that believes in limits. And I believe what happens is, and some people call them boundaries, but what happens is some people want to turn around and say, oh, you know what, you didn't do this as a parent, you didn't do this as a parent, and they didn't do this, and then they want to put blame out there, right? But the point is that one thing you have to know is that right from the get-go, you have to have certain limits in place for the children, so that they understand what parameters are, and start that early as you can. And some people say no, but and will that eliminate everything? No, it won't, but it will eliminate a lot. And then there'll be a certain age where you're dealing with that disrespect, right? So that's why I said sometimes it's age dependent where they're coming at you, children. You know what I mean? With this, some don't understand what they're doing, and then there's others that, whoa, they're just emotionally acting out, and you got to deal with it. So what you want to do once that play's not working, and you tried to, get them on your side, you got to set your limits. You might have to understand that their tension is running so high that they're not in the mood for that little invitation or that little play. So they might just take off on you and run. They might just yell. They might even tell you to leave them alone or get away from them. That attempt that you made, it's just, that's where you start. That's where you try. And you understand that if it doesn't work, that's okay. I acknowledge and recognize that they could still be upset. Maybe you didn't give them enough time. Maybe you need to give them a little bit of space. And you have to be mindful that that little attempt might give them even more attitude. Might even start them up again. But you got to take that chance. You got to go from the positive. See, usually when people do try that, and they only try it once in a while, that positive approach, that, identifying. Usually when that happens, see, people have a tendency to go right and resort right to the punishment, either go for timeouts or lectures. Well, what I say is most important is stopping this behavior, because it's time. It's time to put a halt to this behavior. You got to set your limits. You don't have to yell. You don't have to scream. You don't have to get loud or issue orders. You still got to appeal to the sense of lost connection and the attention your child is craving. So even as you say stop, okay, no more. That's it. Get close. Make that eye contact. Make sure that you're firm in what you say. You know, I can't let you talk to me like that. Come over here. Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's the matter. Have a seat. However, if your child keeps going on and doesn't want to listen, you still got to try to communicate in some sort of way. You know what? And this is what I say. I'll be honest. I say to them, I'm like, listen, you know what? Instead of me going at them, I go, look, I can see that there's something going on with you. Something's bothering you. I don't know what it is, but there's something really bothering you. So instead of me waiting for them to talk to me, right, I'm using language on them to get them to pick up off that. And see, I even found it works so good sometimes, because some kids, I'll say something that's wrong and they'll go, no, that's not what it is. And then they'll start talking. See that strategy? That's a strategy in itself, where you have them not talking, because some cross their arms, right? And they look at you, and or they turn their back and have their backs too, because they're so upset. And see, people don't know how to deal with that. So they hit them with the 1-2, right? They're either yelling, they're either lecturing, or talking to them. No. So what you do is, they're not going to talk. There's something in there. So what you do, you have to hit them with some of that language. Tell them, hey, I know you're not feeling right. What's going on? And see, sometimes I would put him with that information. Oh, I know what happened. This one did this to you, right? And I understand why they did that to you. And maybe they had and then they'll pipe in and go, no, that's not what happened. And next thing you know, boom, I got the conversation going. And once you get the conversation going, you understand that, hey, man, this is a connect that I can work with. This is something where I can meet them. And then I can open them up to the point where they understand that, hey, this is my limit. This is how we should. But once I get them communicating and let them get it out, then I lay it in what I need to do and have myself respected, and I respect them. But I make sure that they understand only when they're completely open and they're ready to talk about it. Right? Not just pushing my agenda. Understanding I'm being as genuine as I can. Because my whole goal is to get them to open up and express themselves, because really they're expressing themselves inappropriately. They are. They're trying to get a message across. They're expressing themselves inappropriately. And it's not really that deep, but for them, it is. It's everything. And we need to understand that. So you don't want to really be approaching them loudly. Be in a quiet spot. Set your limits in a quiet space where it's calm, and speak to them calmly, like you're from the helping perspective. Because this is going to help if they're having some verbal outbursts. If you're coming at them calm, get close and just insist, listen, you need to stop this. This is not acceptable. And see if they're listening and they're really connecting with you. You're going to start to see some, you know, tears fall. You might see some crying because they've connected with you. You'll see them burst into tears, or you could see them raging. You actually could see a range of emotions. However, you do know one thing, that this is progress. It's definitely progress over what has been happening. You can see this is just like a phase. And you bring them back. Once you connect with them and you're on some sort of level where you're communicating effectively and you see that they're calm and they're ready to receive at whatever point, then you can actually start talking to them about, let's say they were throwing things in the house. So it's an opportunity for you to go back and say, hey, you know what? Remember that when you were throwing things, I know you're going through a lot, and I know you're expressing yourself, and you got to get it out. I get it. So what can we do so that you can, when you're feeling this way, you can express yourself? Is there something else that we can do? Or is there any other way I can help you when you're going through this? Right? And listen, be a good listener. And that's if they're open. However, if they're raging, you know, let them go through that too. Let them express themselves. Just be supportive. You know, some people say rub their back. However, I've seen that happen in many situations. And really, you have to really know the person very well. And I've seen it. I've seen people come along and rub people's back, and then there's people that just push off. You really have to know who you're dealing with your children. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what type of child you have. If one's very sensitive to touch, it's an individual thing. It's because of your children doesn't mean, because some people, believe it or not, they're their own children, and they get into maybe the touch, and the child's just not about that. Something could have happened. You don't know where it could have happened, and it's coming out at you because they're feeling safe. But it could have happened on the playground. It could have happened in the schoolyard, daycare, whatever. But that to me is not an approach that I would really recommend, especially if you're sensitive to all these things, different environments and things that could have happened to the child, because a lot of times it could not be something you said or done. Could be the pressure they're feeling from school, or someone who would put them down, or somebody who was trying to get at them, being inappropriate or saying something or using racism or some discriminatory, making or teasing them about their weight or about their class system, like them not having money, not being insufficient of resources. Kids can be mean. And that's why I said, if we understand anything about children, especially in the schools, other kids could really get on other kids and put them into a lot of stress. And if you're a parent, you're going to know, like, hey, a lot of times I'm putting out fires that are happening in those environments, those other alternative environments, like the school, or, on the way to or from, on the bus, right? Whatever it is. Those are issues that we got to deal with, and not disrespect. That's why I say a lot of times you can't take it um, too personal, especially when they're kids. It's a different for me when they're teens, like, to, you know what I mean, mid to late teens, early 20s. That's a whole different spec. But when they're kids, we have to err on the side of caution, right? Like, we have to make sure that we're taking that approach, a supportive approach, because there's so many things that can happen, and there's so many things that can get at our children today that even we put in their hands. Like, some of you putting cell phones in their hands. Like, if they're being bullied, especially at early age, could you imagine? Some parents are giving their kids, like, even, I know it sounds crazy, but maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, they got cell phones, and, think about that. So you can't take it as just being defensive and trying to control the behavior. We have to be more supportive when they're children. We have to see that something's clearly going on. And if it's us, we try to work with it. If it's somebody else, we try to. But the important thing is that we find out what the causes are and what we can do about it. But we have to be mindful that there are different influencers out there on our children, and it impacts them. And they have to be able to express that discomfort. So we have to be there for them, especially during these stages, and grow with this mentality. Grow with these little strategies that you have to, you know, talk to them. Say, you try to understand how it feels, say you're there for them. Tell them, I'm here for you. Don't say too much. Let them cry it out. Don't try and start talking them out of their tears. Let them vent. Let them feel it. You know, they got to go through that. Let their emotions clear, be very clear. Let them feel it. Let it clear out of their body. Let them, you know, decompress. Let them relax. But when they're getting disrespectful, it's not just about a challenge. Sometimes it's going to be one of the hardest things that we can do by engaging in it. But just knowing how with younger children, there are certain cultures, and this. There are certain cultures that, boy, this podcast would not make sense to them because they're the old traditional way. And I'll tell you, I kind of grew up in those old traditional ways where, what? Now we love it because we got to get our respect, but see, we're shutting them down. I think I was shut down, probably for a good reason. I probably would have went on and on and on. But I mean, when I had my upbringing, what? There there wasn't all this psychology to it, I don't think. I think it was you're carried on too much. It's ended here. I dare you to go on some more. Right? That's how it was growing up. And it was it. You cried, you ran, you did whatever you had to do, you got out of there, but you dealt with it. See? And today, I think it's a little bit different, a little bit more challenging because these kids are being impacted by so much influence that not only do they think they're more knowledgeable, they got much more influence. They think they got more options, and that means they got more say because they get access to everything. And so when they get all that access, who are you? Who are you? You're just like me. You did whatever, even though you're paying the bills, take care of business, they're still rapping and talking to you. Oh no, when I grew up, shoot, you would get outside and walk around and be glad. But you weren't mouthing off too much. And people say, hey, it was harder. And there's still cultures out there now that are really like that, to be honest. There's a lot of them that are just like, boom. My concern is that when the reason why I say hands off, period, especially when it comes to sarcasm and disrespect, it's the hardest thing to do. I see people jump on their children because a kid said something to them wrong. Because you know what I mean? Like, I've seen parents actually physically get their kids. And there's other people looking at it going, oh, yeah, that was disrespectful. You should have got him. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of cultures out there have that belief. If your kid's mouthing off being disrespectful, what? There's other people cheering you on if you tear them up and put them back in their spot. And that works for certain people. However, it's not good for the communication. It's a shutdown. And sure, it maintains some silence. But if we're supposed to be more open minded and educated, we have to outdo that last generation. We have to be a little bit more mindful because if you don't start understanding that you have to use that psychology and your mental capacity as opposed to your physical capacity, because if you use that physical on them to correct every little thing, sometimes people did it. It's not nice. Some people said it worked. That kid wasn't listening, wouldn't stop doing, kept telling them this, and they kept doing that. That's to a different degree. But what I'm saying, my concern is when kids get disrespectful, if we keep going on that level where we're applying that old mentality, right, we have to think that there are people out there that take that too far. Because when the kid keeps on rapping, right? Because the kid can rap at you and be disrespectful towards you just like you could be disrespectful to them. Where does it pop? Where does it get out of control? And that's my concern, is that when that abuse starts, right? Because there's a misunderstanding. One of your children could be going through something at school, and you probably be going through your own thing, and they come disrespectful, and you just pop them, you shut them all down. And there could be some abuse going down, could be something by somebody saying, and you know what? Boom, I'm going to say it. There's kids that jump. There's kids that can't take it. And there's kids that don't understand, you know what I mean, that shutdown mentality. And if they're hurting, you know what I mean? That just closes the door because it's about control and it's about our ego, right? Kids are trying to express themselves and going off. Now, I gotta say one word though for a lot of my listeners out there. There are some people that go way off, and you're just like, you're just taking advantage. I get that. There's always going to be that segment, and you still got to deal with them. But when they're little kids, no, you got to understand. People can get harsh, and you can't just apply the heavy hand. You can't, and certain countries are doing it. But you know that one's, look at what's happening in society, a lot of society. Everything's going on, right? And see, look at even today, I think the consequences are there for sure, right? Think about it. I don't think the consequences were there as severe probably about 20 years ago, but now I think people get in your business, right? You know what I mean? People get in your business, and there's a lot of people that get agencies on their back because they're trying to do their family thing, and and it just gets a mess. And the kids, like I said, they're all different kids out there dealing with different issues. However, I do think we have to try, especially with our children, we have to take a supportive role. And if there's some, and this is not even to say if there's any cognitive deficiencies. See, we can't just assume all kids are dealing with different things. There's kids deal with all kinds of stuff, things that they have no control over, right? Whether they have exceptionalities, cognitive deficiencies, whatever. The supportive approach is going to take care of a lot of that, and understand. Because one of the hardest things for us to do as people is to take those comments. Aside from the physical assault, see, the physical assault you can't tolerate. And I've seen it happen. And I mean, especially little kids. And it's very concerning because especially when they're little, and they're so little, and they grab things, and if I've seen kids throw blocks at people's adults' faces, throwing, knocking things over. You all seen it, and they call it temper tantrum. But there's some kids around the wild, and you have a sweet parent, man or woman, they're trying to cope and deal with the kid, and it's really challenging. And it's usually the way it is sometimes. Like, it isn't just a one off and it happens. Usually they're dealing with it a lot, trying to work with it. And I honestly have to say, when it comes to disrespect, I'm going to be the first to say that when it comes to parents trying to raise children, um, man, it is really hard. I think it's harder today because a lot of them feel that the little ones, they're just growing up so fast, even like young. They're so influenced with so many things. Like, think about half the animations out there, right? Like Toy Story and all these animations, they're coming they're coming with adult material that a lot of the adults are relating to, and these kids are getting some of these. Some of them are confused. They're giving adult lessons and some. So you got to be careful with even these shows, some of this influence that these kids are getting at such young age. You can't just sit them in front of TV or a computer and let them go at it. You better monitor that because it will come back to you. And if they are seeing disturbing things through those media platforms, you better take a handle of it now. So that's why I talked about limits, right? I talked about it. And you got to have some. You got to understand that you got to keep yourself cool in all these moments. And you also got to be mindful that when they swear and curse, don't make that just the focus. Don't just jump on that. Take the opportunity to kind of just acknowledge it. Don't put focus on it. Understand it's going to come out because some are going to curse. Some are going to hit you with that language. But be a listening person. Understand that that's going to help. Understand that empathizing is better. And realize there are things that you can do. Practical things. First, you got to notice the behavior. Don't take it personally. Just take it as a sign that your child needs to get some attention at that moment. They need to be listened to. They need to be closer to you, more connected. Something's going on. Something's not right. So you want to respond lightly, honestly, and use your I statements, right? Make a play for that attention, as I told you. Be more inviting. Sometimes you got to be a little bit of warmer than you usually are, a little sillier, a little playful. Try some contacts. Use some nice, nurturing talk. Hey, you come over here. Be that playful person. Even if a little bit of laughter works. The kids, try to make these attempts, make these efforts. Try your best to pull back the layers, that toughness, so that they can let their guard down. Try to lighten the moment if you can. And if that's not working, it's you're not being successful, and that attitude just keeps on. That's when it's time to set that limit. Get close, speak calmly. I'm not going to allow you to talk to me that way. So please come here and sit down with me. And let's discuss what's the matter, what's going on. However, if that attitude continues, hold it. That's your limit. I can see that something's really getting to you. Something's making you feel bad. And I'd like to know what happened. That's the way you could take it. Or you could make some simple strategy, such as if they're refusing, arms crossed, back turned, whatever, and you get an opportunity to try to throw some comments in there, try to be more convincing. Try to relate. Try to get them to talk by using things like I said. Some of those suggestions. Be open to that. Be open to use suggestions just to get them to respond. And then believe it or not, it works. 90% of the time it works. They all fall into it eventually, where they feel that they have to say something because I'm redirecting, right? I'm using that conversation. I'm redirecting with the young ones. So they got to correct me. If I'm telling the story, they got it in their mind already what the story is. So I can switch it up on the kids. Well, I heard you said this, but I'm not really sure. And then they'll interrupt and get involved. And it's an opening. And then, boom, once that gate opens, they start to flow most of the time. But remember, if you can get to that point where you are connected, expect some emotion, some tears, some crying, maybe even some rage. But just sit down. Try to connect. I understand. It's a challenge. It's hard for you. And if they'll let you get close and give them a hug or something to calm down, that's fine. Let it go. Let them express themselves. You're going to have to ground yourself at that point because it could be a whirlwind. It takes a lot of energy for parents to deal with a child that's disrespectful, and maybe it escalates, but it takes your energy. It does. It tires people out. You might need a nap if you go through this. Just thinking about if you get in an argument and you get baited in where you're playing that game, going back and forth, trying to correct them, not making the proper approaches, you could burn yourself out easily, right? Just going back and forth. Just you get trapped, you get caught up in it, and you can't. There's no way you can get caught up into that. You got to resist that. You got to be the supportive person. You can't. You can't go back and forth. And I've seen it where people go, "Oh yeah, say that again," and then the consequences come in and they make threats. It's the wrong approach. So you want to prevent yourself from spiraling out of control. You got to with stress and anxiety. So you got to take a breather, center yourself, recenter yourself, remind yourself that you're trying to help your child, get them to regulate and express themselves, but you're going to have to maintain your cool and think about you for a moment and understand that it takes work and you need to relax for a bit. And sometimes you gotta if your child's getting upset and they're getting irate and going through it, sometimes you just gotta let them go through it. Seriously, I know, like, especially if they're getting all upset, they gotta go through that. Think of it like a big curve that they gotta go through. Sometimes you just gotta step back. If they're going through it, let them go through it. Don't try to fight it. Sometimes that burns your energy. And you're just going back and forth with them, back and forth. If they got to get it out, let them get it out. And then you take it from there. You're going to save yourself a lot of headache if you understand the process of working with disrespectful children. It could get drawn out, but a lot of times I've seen it drawn out a lot longer than it needs to because the parents are fighting for control. They're not coming from the supportive perspective. They're coming from the control. I got to get this thing under control, and you're not going to talk to me. And see all these thoughts go in your head as a parent, like, oh my God, this child is so young. They're carrying on like this. How is this going to work? I don't want to raise a child that's going to be disrespectful to um, everyone growing up and even being. I don't want to raise a child who's disrespectful as they get older. Well, usually, kids are wonderful. They're especially when they're young, they'll go through these things, and generally they'll be fine. However, you do play a major part in that. Setting your limits right from the get go when you have children, right? Having these expectations, having these boundaries, letting them understand. Because when they do have something on their mind, let them express it. But have your boundaries in place. Because it's a lot easier to pull back when they have a place where they started from as opposed to being just out there carrying on with, oh, I've been doing what I want, and you have to still set those limits. You can't let it go on and on. And if it does go on and on, that's when you should be getting the green light. And that green light means you got to go for some help. You got to get into the community. You got to communicate with some parents. You got to get in there and go see your family doctor. You got to start trying to get some assistance. See, a lot of us try to handle it ourselves. And to be honest, you got to know your limitations. What I'm telling you is a very practical strategy to work with disrespectful children. Strongly recommended. However, I do know people handle it different. And some people, they can't go through it because they say the child might go on and it's burning them out, or they're working, they got other things to do, and it seems to be occupying a lot of their time, and they can't do it. So what do? Instead of going for help, they make the matter worse. They punish, 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 and punish, right? They'll put those kids away if they have to, whether they put them in the room, timeout, for longer than they ever should. Because why? Because it's not based on what the child has said or done. It's based on how I'm feeling and how I need to have a break from that child. A lot of the times, it's usually not controlled with a lot of people. That's the only problem, right? So my concern is that we don't understand that, and we have to understand that. So we have to be fair to the child who's communicating themselves. See, I think once we understand that that child who's communicating needs to communicate, then we come from a different perspective and we have a better understanding how to work with the child, as opposed to coming with our own agenda of control and worry and stress and anxiety about what this will look like if it keeps on. But you got to look at yourself and say, what can I deal with? How can I get support if I need it? And it's too much for me. Don't suffer, because there are some people that are embarrassed. They're worried about what people will say. My kid, I can't go and tell people, oh, but right, I can't do it. And to be honest with you, there are kids very, very smart. They know exactly when to act up, in which environment, how to get you when you're vulnerable, right? So you be consistent. I don't care where you're at. A lot of people won't do it. There's people that they know simple strategies like I'm telling you, and they won't apply it because they're out in public. But sometimes you have to. You got to be just as bold as they are, right? Doesn't matter. But sometimes they get you in those positions. And see, it could change a little bit for sure in a different environment how you approach this. However, you still might need some assistance, right? But I'm just saying that too often people don't go for assistance and end up punishing that child a lot longer than they need to, right? Or they go into the shutdown, right? And that drives the kids crazy. It's almost psychologically damaging for those children when you ignore them. So because they've acted up, I've seen it, heard it, seen it. Parents sit up there and they say to the kids, "Oh yeah, well, I'm not. I refuse to talk to you because you're so disrespectful." And next thing you know, they don't talk for the kid. The kid loses her mind, pulls out their hair, calls the police, whatever. They lose it. And the little ones, because they don't know how to manage their emotions, and they were already having difficulty communicating with you that there's something wrong, you know, that I got to get this message through. And there are people too that are saying, you know what, I have a child. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you, counselor. My child will just carry on because I know they want this and I don't want to give them that. So they know exactly what they're doing. And I know my child. And so what I say is, you know your child, as long as you're managing well and you're, made, if you set your limits, some people actually take that. They go, so, right? We get to the point where when a kid gets upset, a lot of us are very uncomfortable with it. We get very uncomfortable when our children rant and rave and they call us, and they're doing it, they're pushing buttons purposely. But 90% of us, we go through these changes where we can't take it. So we can actually take it, but we're not willing to take it. It's not that deep. It seems that deep, but a lot of people, you got sometimes to get used to the discomfort. Like, think about it. Really, that is a breakthrough when you can sit back there, child tripping out, telling you what's up, or even throwing, tearing the whole place apart, and you're sitting there, as long as you ain't getting hurt, and you sit there and you keep your cool, and you start applying some of this stuff I'm telling you, if you can do that, that is a serious breakthrough. And it can work. But like I said, there are exceptions to the rule, and the exceptions to the rule mean children who have like real behavioral problems, children who are oppositional defiant, like they have ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, real behavior exceptionalities. Like if those are things like you have to gauge, but I have to say that a lot of parents will see if it gets too much that yes, it's a scream for help. In a lot of cases, sometimes it could be simpler. In most cases, I think a lot of us could deal, uh, but it's just the approach and how we deal. But if it gets excessive and it's tearing you down, remember, you got to take care of yourself. So you have to get some help. You got to treat it like a cold. You got to treat it like a flu. You got to go see the doctor. And I strongly recommend, if it starts to escalate into abusive behavior, even physical, no, you got to have that stop right away. That physical aggression towards you, because I've seen it. I've seen them be, and that's a disrespectful too, where the occasional kid does the odd thing to the parent. I've seen it where the kid is abusive and physically too, trying because they don't know how to express themselves, and that's how they're expressing themselves. So you might have to go for some counseling or get them some therapy on how to deal with their emotions, number one, and how to protect yourself, number two, in those situations, and get some support, right? If it's getting to that point. But get an assessment if it's out of control. And you could go through school, you could go through your family doctor, you could call up social work. If you're worried about the situation, you're going to have to do it because there could be underlying issues that are going on. And it's something that when you're working regularly and you have enough responsibilities and you're already carrying a lot on your plate, it might not seem so severe, but when you're tired, exhausted, and your child's going on with you at like that, some people, like I said, they just check out. But when you check out and that child is feeling ignored, then they're a lot of times that just escalates their behavior. And they tend to go a little, over the edge with that. So we still have to pay attention to it and not ignore it, and understand that we are only human and that there are approaches, but there are also alternatives which the professionals uh, will have to apply. And we have to stop the stereotype of worrying about what the rest of the world's going to think. We got to get help where we need our help. And if it's in our child who's really, having some difficulty, and you're trying to get them some help, you got to do it with an open mind and swallow your pride and get the help. The one thing you don't want to do is impart your authority on your child and just leave them hanging. You have to have some closure, some sort of closure, especially with the young ones. It could take a while. You could give them a break. You got to keep in touch with them, like checking in on them and stuff, but not too much. You got to have some form of connection with them and understand that there has to be some sort of closure, because we understand there's something going on there and we have to listen. And it's not easy to do, but you got to have some sort of closure. And I mean connect. I don't mean cuddle. I mean connect. Make sure you're closing things off. Understanding that you want to show your child some respect too. You're looking for respect from your child. Ensure that you're showing them some respect. Giving them some power too. That's a very big thing that I think is underestimated when it comes to dealing with children, is that they don't really necessarily need power. Well, the truth is they're young, and you hold all the power. You have it all. And if they're feeling powerless in any sort of way, we have to give them a little bit of power back. Think about it. We have to still empower them. And I'm not trying to say be their best friend during. I mean, after you've gone through this whole process, right? This whole process of staying calm, because we know it's not easy to stay calm. Once you experience a rude child, you got to stay calm, right? If you have to use a mantra, do it. This is not that bad. Like, I do that talk to myself sometimes, where I tell myself, this is not that bad, okay? Um, I'm gonna get through this. It's not a real emergency, but I'm going to be mindful. I'm gonna take some deep breaths. I'm even gonna count if I have to, right? Take care. I'm gonna model it. Model that. So I'm gonna try to stay calm. Try to look at what's happening, look from their perspective, what the causes are, you know. Ask them if, when it's convenient. Only when it's convenient. Because they could be, feeling powerless. And you might even ask them, are you feeling powerless? What's going on? So this is a point where you try to figure out what's going on. Empathize when you can. Try to understand their feelings. But have respect for them. Give them some power. You know? And check time too, because when you get children who have maybe diabetes, they might be, health could be an issue that we're not thinking of. They could have not eaten properly and they're getting disrespectful. See, that's a simple one, but it happens where they get, their low blood sugar, or they're hungry, or they're thirsty, and their needs aren't being met in certain ways, right? So they get disrespect. Don't take that personal. There's people that take it so personal. They go, "Oh, be quiet. You'll eat when you'll eat," and they'll snap at them. And if you don't be quiet, you're gonna go there. It doesn't sound pleasant, but people do it, especially when they know they're trying to accommodate their child, and they're not doing it fast enough. They might have other children, and then the kid gets sarcastic and smart because of it, and then boom, it blows up to so much more. So you got to be careful. Watch how long things start to go awry for, and look at those reasons too. Check it. What's going on. Make sure that um that you're not being so engaged that you're not aware of the little things, and try to slow it down. Slow things down. It's easy to just boom, steam straight ahead, especially when you're involved in this emotional struggle. You want to limit yourself from responding to every criticism and complaint your child puts on you. Try to put on the brakes. Understand. Listen, but listen for the meaning more than the words, right? Don't talk too fast when you do talk to them. Make sure you're calm. And I told you, connect. Connect. And I don't mean hug them. If they're misbehaving, let go through the process, you know. Understand what they need. Try to work through approaching them in every manner possible, you know, and try to make some sort of closure. That's what I mean. Connect with them on some point. Understand there's something going on. Don't try to lecture. Just make sure. And teaching let long lessons. No, that's not what they're looking. They're little children. They gotta do their processing and expressing. And you gotta allow them to do that. So give them a little bit of power too. Make sure you empower them. Don't take all their power. Above all else, try to be cool. Try to avoid confrontation yourself. Because if you're in a heightened emotional state, you're not thinking rationally. And a lot of times people just go straight to the consequences. So before you even go to consequences, there are at least three things that you could do before just resorting to a consequence. And I really strongly recommend, first of all, take a deep breath. You know, get out of that emotional state. Try to empty your brain, relax your mind so that you're rational in your thinking. Be aware of your body if you're tense or relaxed. Just take some deep breaths. Deep. And hold it for 3 seconds. Out. Deep breath in. Hold 3 seconds and out. Do that. Just know you're going to go. Some of you know you might go on a roller coaster ride with this child. So you're going to have to prepare yourself. And once you're done breathing and relaxing, before you just engage and say, I'm going to do this, try as best you can to respond with empathy. Let them know and understand that you're aware of their point of view. And, say to them, before we can get into this, before we can talk about anything, you're going to have to, calm down. And if your child continues to carry on, just take a break. Don't feel pressure. Don't just get into the consequence. Okay. So listen, my listeners, we've talked today about what? Disrespectful children and how to work with them and keep yourself in control and understand what the main focus is. The main focus is not just to come from the old traditional way of thinking of control, right? Control, you want to be coming from the supportive perspective, the understanding, and actually applying some real strategy. So I want to say thank you to all my listeners. And until we speak again, thank you.